Lately, we've been getting a lot of information about the blooming power system and just how deep it ties into the Yozakura family's existence. The ways it can evolve, the unique power that can come from it, and even lore in general. We all got that from the final preparations leading into Operation Frontlines. With the hunt for Kawashita on, you naturally expect a lot of matchups, and starting with episode 23, going one by one, the Yozakuras face off with the Tampopo in a race against time to stop the seed sowing project. Content coverage for episode 23, we have chapters 69 up to 72 adapted, giving Futaba and Shinzo the spotlight. As the anime begins to end its run, there really isn't any room for anime-only editions, so from here on out, expect them to be very minimal, if anything, to almost none. This section of the story, being the climax of Act 1, is pretty much a straight line till the battle is over, and as I mentioned before, is one of my favorite arcs as of recent Weekly Shonen Jump. Now, to start off the matchups, we're kicking off a battle of the sisters with Futaba versus Akai, a master of martial arts versus the manipulator of flames. We've recently been able to get more glimpses of just how powerful Futaba is despite her size, and knowing her sense of duty to her family, she is the last person that will go down easy. This fight is when I knew that Futaba was going to be one of my favorite characters, but before we arrive at the main dish, I want to pull back to Akai. With family being a central theme of the story, and even though the Tampopo are a bit of a dysfunctional one, there is a bit more context regarding the origin for some of these members. In Akai's case, her family was taken away from her by an arsonist, in which Kawashita helped track down for the sake of avenging her family. You can see once again how Kawashita has manipulated someone's desire against them and securing their use for the Tampopo's goals, and also how consistent the theme of family is on both the good and bad side. For the most part of this fight, Futaba is on the defensive, as let's be honest, if she were to go on the offensive, it probably would have been over really quick. She makes it clear though that this mission isn't about harming everyone else, but mainly to arrest Kawashita. Naturally, everything Futaba says goes through one ear and out the other, and Akai is just letting it rip left and right with these flames, giving us a noteworthy cool cut in the midst of the fight. It's clear that Akai has no intention of listening, her own burning hatred pointed towards the person in front of her, and to overcome that hill, Futaba vows to embrace it all as she kicks into her blooming. One of my favorite spreads finally making way into anime format. As a form of critique, I wish the wave of flames was kept all the way through, and perhaps the atmosphere was altered a little bit for something a bit darker red, allowing the blooming to really shine through. Just my personal opinion, as I think landing the shot with some extra creative choices, even just for a brief moment, can really be an episode highlight, but what we got wasn't bad either. Now, remembering each blooming brings a new ability, we're also introduced to Futaba's power known as magnanimity. Combined with her finger movements and now heightened kinetic vision, she's able to neutralize any attack with projectiles being the main type here. A supreme defense that not even the extreme heat can overcome, and knowing Futaba's duty as the eldest daughter, we can see why her power turned out to be this. The battle of attrition pretty much turning into hitting a giant wall immune of damage, though Akai's own limits slowly being reached. Every Yozakura user has their limit. We saw it with Nomen, the White Snake, and here Akai is no different, as combustion is slowly but surely coming for her. With her already being a pawn for the Tampopo, she didn't value her life much as is, but this is what Futaba means to embrace it all. Taking the flames, the negative feelings, and in an instant she quells it all with her Kochi Easterly Wind technique. Again, another personal opinion, but the manga gave off the impression that there was a little bit more intensity with the extinguishing of the flames occurring throughout the body. I had the impression that this would occur for a few seconds rather than an instant, but just a difference in interpretation as the first matchup comes to a close with Futaba as the victor. Akai's life is a parallel to Tayo's, as where he found hope, she gave into the emptiness that comes with grief, but trying to kick the bucket early is not the way, and sometimes all someone needs is just a little bit of empathy. Before moving into the next fight, we had a major red flag shown during Kawashita's brief mention of the goddess of victory. As teased by the OP and foreshadowed during the Yozakura banquet, we see that Rei Yozakura's body is indeed frozen and in the hands of the Tampopo. What the goddess of victory could mean, we'll just have to wait and see, but I imagine it'll play out in the finale. Make sure not to forget that this is the hidden objective of the operation, even with all the chaos. Moving back inside, more encounters keep coming along, with with Kingo and the Nao running into Aonuma and Shinzo deciding to take the challenge versus Kurosawa. We're gonna keep chronological and focus on Shinzo's fight. This time, it's a battle of weapons. Their ideals in contrast, as Shinzo's weapons are created to protect, while Kurosawa, being a living weapon, is for killing of any kind, even those on his own team, and it's a choice Shinzo cannot ignore. For this fight, the usual arsenal isn't cutting it, and so to take it up a notch, we get to Shinzo's Ukon Turmeric Cherry Blossom, an indefinite alloy that can constantly recreate itself in real time into whatever is needed for the job, ranging from tools of offense to defense. Also being the cover of volume 15, and it's a pretty unique idea to add to a weapon master's arsenal. The combination of this tool allows him to keep up with the situation, but in terms of ending the battle, Shinzo will lose as he's unable to stop the regeneration. That is, until he decides to bring out his blooming. While we know Shinzo to be a scaredy cat, it goes a bit deeper than just the gags, with his blooming being something he was initially afraid of because of how much damage it can cause. Even Shion was hesitant to go along with the idea, but we get to see the words of encouragement Rei left behind. She loved her son who feared his own power because it reflected his own kindness and strength, both of which he will use to protect his family, ending off the episode with his blooming now returning. This will take us into episode 24, continuing the streak of battles. Chapter coverage wise, we're kicking the episode off from chapter 73 all the way to the early panels of chapter 77. We continue on, picking right back up with Shinzo's fight, and after a couple of blows were exchanged, we get to know what his blooming really is. That being known as Destroy, which allows him to destroy pretty much anything down to a cellular level, which was very much needed for this fight as the alloy making up Kurosawa's body would allow him to constantly regenerate, thus flipping the battle from a somewhat stalemate to an overwhelming victory, with Shinzo dealing the major blow that will settle the fight. As for some criticism, firstly, the storyboard for this entire episode, quite frankly, was very lackluster in my opinion. The action being kinda weak, and there was also a lot of removed dialogue that would have required some form of narrator. Again, stay tuned for the post-season 1 criticism for elaboration in the future. With 2 antagonists down, however, the process begins to speed up on the Tampopo side, as Kawashita begins to minimize his own risk and the full picture of his plot comes to light. The seed sowing project is very literal, as it's sowing the seeds of destruction, as 2,000 tons of Hazakura are stored underground. Upon the base's explosion, it will release into the sea and eventually into people's water consumption, and I'm pretty sure we can understand what is going to happen from there. We've seen the results of people who are not compatible with the drug, and if it reaches to a widespread level, then we're looking at a full-on doomsday. The situation is now amping up to be a race against time, and Shion is stepping up to the plate to not only deliver us all this information, but to get to work on the inside as well via hacking, thus leading to a battle on her own technological battlefield against Cha-Cha. In terms of round 1, Shion gets swept given her weakness, aka a power source to infiltrate systems, is exposed, and Aonuma, already chasing Kingo, manages to knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. An initial setback that thankfully is able to be held off from absolute failure, because if there is one thing you can rely on in this show, you know it'll be family. Kingo manages to come in clutch, and we get to see a nice brother and sister moment here, which is just as important as Taiyo and Mutsumi's moments in regards to growing bonds. As carefree as Kingo is, he also has the more nuanced side to him when it comes to his observation and understanding of his siblings. Shion is somebody who is willing to put herself in danger first as much as she is willing to shut herself away. The classic introverted lifestyle, but familial care is a two-way street, and with a pretty cool line from Kingo, they gotta walk this tightrope together. The chaotic divide and conquer turns into a full-on 2v2, with Shion putting some more trust in her brother, concluding the events of chapter 74. Chapter 75 through 76 is where the content really begins to amp up again. With Kingo's masterful confusion and Shion's interference, the two are able to cut off the enemy's momentum and set up the stage for their own bloomings to end off chapter 75. As far as critique goes, unfortunately, some content was cut out as they skipped the character introduction for the anime, and for the Shion blooming panel in comparison, well, I'll be honest, but my disappointment was immeasurable. I don't understand why so many creative bits from the manga are stripped from the anime, but again, post-season 1 critique. Moving into the bloomings themselves, Kingo's is known to be assimilation. By using mirror neurons, he can assimilate with that person and come to know every little detail about them. Even even down to a character's backstory. Through his blooming, we get to see Aonuma's origin, and quite frankly, he really isn't a bad person deep down. Despite being abandoned by his family, the kindness of one elderly woman kept him alive. The jacket he wears now being her memento, and with Kingo being able to unfreeze those memories he kept frozen in guilt, he was able to bring this match to a forfeit with Kingo as the winner. Surprisingly sweet portion of the episode coming from Kingo, and I think Ondaira did a good job getting the message out that even strangers can express familial-like warmth and even give up their lives for the sake of others. As for Shion, her blooming is known as analyzation, her brain kicking it up to top gear and becoming fast enough to compute data on a level that rivals a supercomputer. Not even Cha-Cha's brain is that fast, and with a clean 2-0, Shion disconnects him from the system, bringing the score to a clean 4-0 for the Yozakura family. Everyone's efforts have led up to this point, with our main men of the house arriving at the location of Kawashita. From this point on, the dance with destiny has truly begun, and with episode 25, it's all coming ahead. As for this week's episode, we went from chapter 77 to 79, and what better way to kick it off than with your Act 1 antagonist awaiting your arrival. A tricky situation is presented to us as the detonation system to the base is linked to Kawashita's biometric data. Any sustained damage will trigger the doomsday, leaving Taiyo and Kyoichiro at a bit of a stalemate. It only gets more frustrating as we see Nanao having to deal with Mizuki and Ai, and at first glance, he's not doing so hot. Now, as far as critique goes, for the entire Nanao section, they greatly tuned down the depiction of injuries and pretty much stripped the anime of them. In comparison, it simply looks like Nanao got roughed up a little bit, which is quite a shame considering the anime hasn't really held back on depicting the crueler moments. However, censoring isn't a new thing, but yeah, I couldn't help but notice. The battle between these three isn't so much of a brawl compared to the others. Though Ai does have the physical capabilities, Mizuki is all about his poisons, working to detain the captives that Nanao was trying to free. Peaceful negotiations immediately shot down, and we get to see just how Mizuki and Ai became acquainted. Both of them victims of society, with Mizuki's family being poisoned to death and Ai being a victim of child abuse. Once again, we continue to see how family plays a part in one's motivations. You can't blame these people for the lives they live now, of course no thanks to Kawashita. Yet their actions aren't necessarily justified either, and in the nick of time, reinforcements finally arrive. If you remember back during the final preparations, we knew the Hinagiku and the police were cooperating in order to get the mission underway. All forces arriving right on time, taking out all the riffraff and lending a hand where they can. A bit of smooth action, but cut short by Ai's desperation to protect her home. Now, in her case, we can see that despite being in the Tampopo, she truly does not belong here. At the root of it all, she's just a child, and the very foundation of this facility and all that which it houses is a vision that Nanao cannot ignore. As for the last family blooming of the season, we arrive at Nanao's being adaptation. Probably the cleanest one out of all of them this season, especially with the puffy material floating in the air, and once more, we are greeted with his smaller form. No matter the poison or environment, his body will make it adaptable or essentially counteract the negative substances. A perfect solution to Mizuki, shutting him down to the core, thus quickly bringing their standoff to a close. However, in Ai's desperation to stop the Hinagiku, we briefly saw the Hazakura come online, but her body is unable to withstand the shock. Restoring the imbalance is something that Nao cannot do alone, and it comes down to a sacrifice from Mizuki using his own parasomnine to even out the imbalance, and by doing so, costing him his life. The image of his deceased daughter living on through Ai, and even with given into despair, he did everything he could to protect her, both from the abuse and from the clutches of Kawashita. It was cut out, but Mizuki did body Ai's abusive mother to emphasize that point, and in his final moments, he left a request to Nanao to bring her back into the light. A bittersweet farewell, leaving Ai an emotional mess, and now the final stage has been set, with Shion breaking the link between Kawashita and the detonation system. Taiyo not even hesitating to take the first shot with a newly powered up Yae, which was a lot bigger looking in the anime. This is the day that Kawashita's amusement ceases when it comes to manipulating other people, pulling us into chapter 79. With Taiyo getting his turn out, Kyoichiro goes straight for the kill, but if killing your antagonist was that easy, then I'm sure it'd be done by now. Through a heck of an info dump, we learn that Kawashita is somebody that should have been dead many years ago. Originally born in 1914, serving as an army army doctor in World War II, his very existence right now is an anomaly that haunts the Yozakura family. His mission back then to research the family and their supernatural powers to create bioweapons, but there's an interesting point here made from Kyoichiro. The Yozakuras became independent in 1895 from the government, many years before the war, so who exactly is the one that was supplied for his research? With only a small tease given, we know that this rabbit hole goes a little bit deeper than what we know, but for now, we must face the wall in front of us, with Kawashita debuting his own actual blooming. Are we surprised? Not really. Considering he's been around for a long time, it's only natural that he'd come the closest, and contributing to his long life, his blooming is known as regeneration. Storing the DNA of his test subjects within, he's able to create backups and even amalgamations of them, leaving our duo with a giant present that nobody asked for. Make no mistake though, after coming so far, this is the last thing they'll let stop them, as Kyoichiro combines his puppet child with Taio's hardening to get him through the monster, prompting a one-on-one with Destiny. I have a lot to say about Frontlines in the future, but I'm very much looking forward to the season finale, and hopefully there will be some highlights within these next 2 episodes. To my anime onlys, it's about to get very real, and I do hope you enjoy the next 2 weeks. With that, ladies and gentlemen, will bring me to the end of the 3-piece episode review. As always, thank you very much for watching, and let me know all your thoughts about these 3 episodes in the comments section down below. Be safe out there, and I'll see you all next time to wrap up the season.